Hey, thanks for clicking on this video. My name is Zaji, and today I'd like to share with you a little bit about some sewing things. In particular, we're going to finally be talking about sewing with a projector, specifically cutting out patterns and fabric using a projector. And I have been using my projector now for about 2 years, so I feel like I've got a fair bit of information to share with you about the experience and what I've learned. So I'm going to be talking about the pros and cons of using a projector. I'm going to be talking about whether or not I would recommend a projector for your sewing situation. And finally, I'm going to be talking about some of the basic information you would need when you are thinking about purchasing a projector. So if that sounds of interest to you, then I encourage you to not only subscribe to this channel, please do click on the notification bell so that we can continue talking about sewing things together. So if you are new to this channel, like I said, my name is Zaji. I am a pattern tester and pattern collector. I am obsessed with sewing patterns and all types of other crafty things, but sewing is really my main love. So I make lots of things all the time. Sometimes it is just for myself, but oftentimes I'm making things for myself, my husband, and my daughter. I am a pattern tester for a couple of different companies that offer all 3 size ranges, so I tend to test a variety of things all the time. Now that would take absolutely ages if I was not using my projector. The number one thing that I would say is a pro about using a projector is the amount of time it saves. Now this obviously only applies to PDF patterns because those are the only types of patterns you'd be able to use with a projector, but my projector is actually right here. These black cords are what connects it to the power and then to my laptop. I didn't say that before, but that's why I will probably keep motioning up here. But yes, is the time. You don't have to worry about printing, tessellating, cutting. You can move straight into cutting out your pattern if you want to trace from your projector onto paper, if you prefer cutting your fabric with a paper pattern. But you can also, which is what I do, just project straight onto the fabric and cut straight from the projection. And that takes literally no time at all. It is so quick, so fast. The best thing. The second pro that I have about using a projector is the fact that it reduces the amount of paper that you're using. Obviously, when you use, even if you're printing out on an A0 size, you are going to be using paper inevitably. I use loads and loads and loads of paper. I used to get the huge reams with like the box that had 5 reams of paper in it, and I would go through those all the time, and it was just, oh my god, so much paper. And if I was making things for my daughter, she's growing all the time, so patterns that I loved, I was printing all the time in the next size up. And so it was just so tedious with all that paper, figuring out recycling for that. We had to have a separate like trash situation. It was, I mean, not trash, but like recycle situation just for my patterns and stuff, not just for the whole house. It's crazy. Anyways, so you're reducing the amount of paper you're using and tape and all of those resources that you would have to use to make it. So it saves you on paper, and paper is not cheap. So there we go. Within that, it's obviously better for the environment for you to not be using as much paper. Even if you are recycling it, it is just better for you to not use it and just have a digital file and digitally put it on the fabric. Less waste. Okay, so the third final pro that I'm going to talk about in this video is that it can be a rather efficient way to have your sewing hobby, just in space, like storage and that sort of thing. If you're someone who does make loads of PDF patterns and you prefer to have your patterns hanging, or if you're someone who does, you know, put them into folders or something like that to keep those patterns safe and to store them in your like sewing space, then this will offer the ability for you to get rid of all of those patterns, or at least not add to them anymore, and you won't have to worry about finding space to put these other patterns, because if you do start to sew quite a bit, you will accumulate quite a few patterns. Even if you're not an avid collector like myself, you will collect, you know, a fair bit, and depending on how you store your patterns and things like that, this can really offer a lot of space saving and dual purposeness, lethal-shun to your whole situation. I have mine right over my cutting table because obviously this is where I cut, but I used to have all my PDF patterns that I would print out in manila folders, and oh my gosh, storing those is crazy, organizing them is crazy. It's so easy to just go to the file, pull it up, and now I don't have to worry about looking through there and that place looking a mess because I've torn through there looking for a specific pattern, and I suck at putting things back the right way. As you can see, I just have stuff where it goes, okay? Maybe not where it's meant to be, but where it goes. So it has saved me lots and lots of space, and if you're someone who's looking to add more space to your sewing area, this could be a way to downsize on a really large collection. That's all I'm saying. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and move on to the cons. I'm going to do 3 cons for the projector as well. So the first con is going to be that you have to mount this thing. And even if you don't have to mount it, you have to figure out some way to stabilize it, which can be an issue for a number of reasons, but mounting can be sort of a stop for a lot of people, especially if you're someone who's in a renting space, or if you're renting your space, if you are in a shared space where someone might not want to have a projector up, and getting up there to do it is pretty difficult. I asked my husband to do it and he did put it up for me, so I can't even tell you, but I've heard lots and lots of grief from other people in trying to mount this situation. And even if you don't mount it, I've heard that the tripod situation, if you have it on its own stand or something, can also be quite finicky, and you can't always ensure that things will be 100% accurate because it's not stable. So that's its own thing. If you don't mount it correctly, or if you have it on a tripod and you're not able to stabilize it enough for your cutting, then it can lead to inaccurate sizing on your patterns or misshapen garments, things like that. So this is something that you will have to figure out how to secure it, and that can be a huge con for some people. The second thing is, of course, calibrating your projector. Now, I'm lucky enough to where my projector is actually mounted, so I don't have to worry about things really moving around. My table does move quite a bit, but it's something I'm conscious of, so I make an effort to not wobble my table around while I am using my projector, of course. But it can be something that will lead to you having much longer time spent trying to calibrate your projector to connect to your devices, or to be the right scaling for your cutting area and making sure everything is nice and accurate. So it's definitely, if you get that wrong, it might take a good bit of time for you to start playing around with the settings and everything to get things as accurate and as scaled properly as you can. So that's its own thing, and sometimes it really gets under my skin. But you know, but the last con that I'm going to talk about, number 3, is going to be the fact that if you're someone who does make loads of adjustments to your patterns, it may not offer as much it may not add as much time saving to your cutting routine as if you didn't have to make those pattern adjustments. So for myself, I always have to make an adjustment for my height because I am quite tall, and most pattern blocks are made for women much shorter than I am. So I always have to make adjustments as far as that's concerned. And there's other minor adjustments that I do make as well, but it can be quite tricky to learn how to do those things with your projector without having to trace the pattern out and mark them on the pattern piece that you traced from your projector, which, you know, may or may not take less time. Of course, if you're using a roll of tissue I use medical paper to trace out if I know it's something that's very form-fitting and I know I need to make all the adjustments for it to fit just right. Then I will project the pattern onto some tissue paper and then make the adjustments on the tissue paper. And that, you know, may or may not take less time if you were to just print it out and then make the adjustments, but I still feel like it saves me time because I don't have to print and tape and then make the adjustments. I can just project onto the paper, trace, and make adjustments. So it does save time, but not nearly as much time if I didn't use the projector. So it might not be as much of a benefit. It might actually take longer if you are struggling with making those adjustments with the digital files and everything. So I know that can be a huge mind cramp if you are not, you know, super comfortable with making adjustments and things like that. So that can also just kind of be a con in my opinion. I could have just put that on the table. Why'd I throw it? See what I'm saying? I don't know how to put things back. Okay, so we went through the pros and cons. With that in mind, I'm going to talk about scenarios where I would actually recommend that you get a projector. So the questions that I get the most are usually whether or not I recommend that someone get a projector. So I'll talk about the scenarios where I would recommend, and I'll also talk about some scenarios where I probably wouldn't recommend that you get a projector. To add to your sewing situation. Now, I do not recommend that you get a projector if you know that your sewing space is not in a stable space. So if you're someone, for instance, I used to sew on a super tiny desk in the corner of my bedroom, and having a sewing machine and a serger on there was literally all that I could fit, and I would cut things out on the floor. So if I were to cut things out in the same spot every time on the floor, then I would say I probably would still get that projector, because I can still project down onto a cutting mat and get the same benefits. Of course, cutting on the floor kind of sucks. I hate cutting on the floor. My back always hurts after I do it now. I think because I've just been hunched over on the floor cutting for such a long time. But if I knew that I was going to cut in the exact same space, then I would definitely put a projector there. But if you cut in different places all the time, like maybe you're in your kitchen this day, or in your living room over here, or maybe sometimes you're in a guest room, or who knows, on your dining table, and sometimes you're on this table. If you're always moving around where you're cutting at, I wouldn't recommend you get a projector, just because it would be very difficult and more time consuming to recalibrate it every single time. Because in order to be very accurate as you can be, you want to make sure to do the calibration every single time, or not the calibration, but make sure that the aspect ratio that it's being projected onto your table is at actual size, at the right percentage. So, and I'll talk about that in a second, but it would be a pain in the butt to have to recalibrate all the time, every single time you move locations. So I don't recommend that you get one if you have a variable cutting area. I would definitely recommend it if you are someone who does have a space set aside specifically for cutting. So if you have a cutting table you always use, I definitely recommend that you do it. Or if, like I said, you cut in the exact same spot, please do it. Get a projector. It'll probably save you so much time. I would not recommend that you get a projector if you're someone who's just beginning with sewing. There are many things to learn and figure out how to do that would improve your sewing than adding a projector into the mix. It can be beneficial once you get down the line. I'm not saying that, you know, you absolutely cannot get one. I'm not telling you that you can or can't do anything, but I'm just letting you know that I wouldn't recommend it if you have only made maybe a handful of projects. I would maybe wait to figure out if it's really something that you want to do. If you're someone who has a handmade business where you sew things, I 100% recommend that you get a projector. And that will save you so much time, especially if you have multiple sizes of things you make or multiple different kinds of items that you make. I 100% recommend you get a projector. It will save you so much time. It will make your life so much easier. I would definitely recommend that you highly, highly, highly consider mounting it. And I would not recommend it personally. I would not recommend if you can't find a way to mount it to project down onto your cutting surface. I wouldn't recommend it. I know that's, you know, definitely going to be controversial, and there probably are plenty of people who could make a tripod situation work with their projector. I couldn't. So for personal experience, I would not recommend. That was not fun. I ended up just asking my husband to do it, and thankfully he didn't mind doing it, because listen, I probably would have returned the projector and we would not be here, okay? Anyways, so I would also recommend getting a projector if you're someone who has young children that you sew for, just because children grow so quickly. I know from personal experience, and their sizes do fluctuate quite a bit. This would give you a lot of opportunities to not have to be like me and have tons of recycling going through every single size of patterns you love, and you can just go to the next size, and that is amazing. So love that. I would probably not recommend projector sewing for you if you're someone who doesn't sew very often. This is an expense. You can easily pay $50 for one of these projectors, but you may find that you want a $1,000 projector and that's the only one that will work for your space, or $200 is still a lot of dollars. Still a lot of dollars to spend on, you know, another thing in your house, and it may be better to spend that on fabric or something, especially if you only make a few garments every now and again. It can still be helpful, and if you got it, boo, you got it. Get you a projector and let it sit and collect dust, but I definitely would not recommend it for someone who doesn't sew quite often. But if you do sew all the time, I'd say just go for it, especially if you're thinking about it and you want to, and you're starting to get annoyed with doing printing and taping. Like with me, like I said, I test loads of patterns. Sometimes I'm making 6 different garments, 7 different garments, 8 different garments, 20 different garments in a month. And that is 20 times that I'm printing out patterns, taping them, and cutting them, and then cutting out the fabric. It just, yeah, saves so much time not having to deal with that. So those are all the things that I would recommend. So if there's any of those situations or any of those circumstances that you feel like might apply to you or doesn't apply to you and you still have questions, just let me know down below. Just let me know down below. Okay? Okay. So now I'm going to talk about some of the basic things that you would need to know before purchasing a projector. Now, there are very many places to buy projectors. I will leave links to all the resources or all of the places that I know you can get a projector. I'll also have the projector that I have linked down below if you're interested. Everywhere that you go will usually have information for you to be able to decide whether or not the projector will be good for your space. So the #1 measurement is going to be from the place wherever it is that you're going to mount your projector at to the space where you're going to be cutting at. So that could be cutting on the floor or cutting onto a table. You just need to be able to make that measurement and know how far of a distance you have between those 2 points. And that will really help you in being able to decide what kind of projector you would need, because there are just as many different types of projectors as there are sewing machines. So there's no way I can say specifically to one or the other, but they will typically tell you how far of a distance you need for the optimal projection. And for my mini projector, it recommended 6 feet of distance at least for the optimal size picture. So and that's something you'll need to take into account. So you'll want to measure your space and figure out exactly how far your mounting surface is from your cutting surface, and have that number in your mind, because on the description for your projector it will tell you what the recommended distance is, and you want to make sure that it is going to at least be suitable for your space. The next thing that you'll want to know, which probably should come before, but you'll need to make sure that your PDF pattern that you're using, or PDF pattern companies that you do use, that they offer at least an A0 or a copy shop file. Or a lot of times now, pattern companies will offer a copy shop file or a projector file within your purchase so that you're able to use your projector. The next thing that you'll want to know is what type of device are you going to be using for your projector. Are you going to be using your phone, a tablet, a computer? You'll need to make sure that the projector that you purchase is able to work with what technology you have to be able to connect. So some of them connect via Bluetooth, some of them connect with actual cords, and some of them only work with computers. So you'll just have to make sure and look and see that you're able to make those two align with each other. Next, you want to make sure that your space is able to be darkened, because projectors work best in a fairly dark room. It doesn't have to be pitch black, because I oftentimes don't make it pitch black in this room. There's too much crap. I would hurt myself. Can't let it be pitch black in here. So I often do either have like a window open, or I'll turn on my low light lamp, and that's usually enough light for me to be able to see, but also still the room can be dark enough for me to be able to see what's being projected down onto the table. So that's something that you'll need to make sure of in picking where your projector is going to be at. So you'll want to make sure that it's in a room that can be darkened quite a bit. Also, you'll want to make sure that your projector projects at least 1080p. Some people say 720, but I just feel like even with my 1080p, sometimes the lines aren't nearly as crisp as I feel like they could be. So I would recommend getting a 1080p, especially if you're buying one new. Of course, if you're buying an older version or something like that, then of course, you know, go with what's there. But if you are purchasing new, I would say to go ahead and go for 1080p just for accuracy's sake. That was so hard to say, because you do not want your lines to be looking pixelated when you're cutting out your patterns, because that can really change the shape of a garment, or you might miss notches, things like that, markings that are supposed to be on your pattern pieces. So I would say to try to get as high a resolution as you possibly can to stay as accurate as you can, and you know, with your tracing and cutting. So yeah, those are all the things that I have to talk about today. I will insert some footage of me talking about cutting out new Made for Mermaids Heidi pattern, which I tested. So I did put a little clip together, so I'm going to go ahead and go to that, and then I'll come back. Starting off here, I've got a projector file open on my screen, and you'll notice over here that I have the layers on. So that's going to help you with your cutting. If your pattern is already formatted for projectors, then it will already have these layers set up for you. So you want to go ahead and open Adobe, and you want to go ahead and check the layers, which is going to be this little icon here that has the 3 squares that are kind of stacked up on top of each other. So I have selected my size, which is blue, and sometimes you'll notice that they'll have a layer that'll probably be, you know, labeling everything that's within your pattern, and you'll want to make sure that everything that they say you need to leave checked is obviously checked. But there's also, with Made for Mermaids in particular, they have 2 options for you to calibrate your pattern. Now, I have already spoken about this, I know in the video, but I work with my projector a lot, and I have it mounted securely. So I know that with Made for Mermaids that I need to have my projector set at 48% with where my particular table is set up and how my cut and everything is, and that's something that you'll be able to figure out in time, I'm sure. So once you have it set up, you can choose to either have the 2" by 2" square grid to help you align and calibrate your projector file to be the accurate size, or you can use the 4 by 4 centimeter option here to select what you need to help you get the right size. Now with this particular pattern, I know that my cut table is set up to where this will fit more easily if I have it rotated the opposite direction. So now that I'm in here, I'm going to go ahead and come up to the top here, and I'm going to go to View. I'm going to rotate my view just like that, because it's going to be easier for me in particular to cut out my pattern this way. So that's something that I like to play with too. And because this is on your screen, you can of course edit this, scroll this as much as you want to so that it fits perfectly on your fabric itself. So this is one of my
my tips. I definitely do this often. It makes it so that it's so much easier for me to actually get everything set up. So I'm going to go ahead and come up to the top. This is going to be my zoom percentage. Now you may have to play around with this percentage quite a bit to get it to fit your, to be in the right aspect ratio for you to be able to cut out accurately. Now I've already spent loads of time playing around with this feature and figuring out what I need. For me, I need everything to be at 48% for it to be 100% accurate size when I do cut it out on my table. Now, this will vary loads. I recommend starting somewhere at like 50% and moving by 0.5% while you're trying to adjust. You're going to want to use a flat ruler, or if you want, most PDF patterns already have their files with some sort of 1-inch measurement to make sure that you're accurate. You can go ahead and print out 1 page of the PDF cut and tape pattern and put that on your table and make sure that that lines up with either your 2-inch by 2-inch grid or your 4 by 4 centimeter grid. Or you can obviously, if you're using a cutting mat, if you're not using just scissors, if you are using like a rotary mat, something like this, then you can of course use your table measurement, because those are going to be pretty accurate as well. Depends on how I feel and if I'm using a company I've never used before. But like I said, I test with this company often, so I know what percentage I need to be able to be accurate. But if I want to go ahead and check, then I can. Now, I have already selected and I want as much space as I can. So I'm going to go ahead and close my layers down. And I'm going to go ahead and take all this side information, which I don't need while I'm cutting, and I'm going to go ahead and reduce that down too. I'm going to be cutting a crop top version of this. And
so right now you can see I have the pattern lined up on my fabric. And I have it lined up to where the fold is on the fold. And I'm ready to cut out right now. Like I said, I already have done my calibrating steps to figure out what size I need. But I just want to show you how it projects out. So I'm using a dark fabric. So you can see this is a super dark fabric. This is the back reverse side of a brushed poly. So this is a knit fabric. On the reverse it is white. So that's going to be optimal for me to actually cut out this fabric. Now, it's not going to be super obvious for you all because one, it's dark in here and all of those things. And you won't be able to see if I were to increase the light. So hopefully you will be able to see kind of where these lines are. So right here is one cut line that I will need. You can take something like a Frixxion pen or something that is going to be washable or air removable, water removable, some sort of pen like this. And you can go ahead and draw out your pattern onto your fabric and cut from there. You know, I'm going to do some dotted lines. It's something that I do often if, for instance, I need to make loads and loads of adjustments to a pattern. I am going to make loads of adjustments to this, well, not loads, but I am going to make an adjustment to this pattern. But one thing I do want to point out is that you don't have to cut just straight from the projector file onto your fabric if you don't want to. You can, of course, use this method to trace onto fabric pattern paper or regular printer paper or whatever, and make your adjustments that way, and it be just easier in that regard. I, of course, like to do everything with my projector, so I'm not fiddling around with paper at all. But if you are someone who would feel more comfortable, or if you're using something that, I don't know, is maybe very large, or you know that you're going to use in the future over and over again, like a pattern you will repeat and use, it will probably be more convenient for you in that regard for you to go ahead and use your projector, put some paper down, and cut it out. So I've already cut out this top part, so you can see that this top part has been cut. Now, I've moved, I'm going to straighten out all my fabric. And continue cutting. And just meet my line I cut from up top.
I have my cutter, rotary cutter at an angle. I'm going through. And now I have made the adjustment I need to make onto this pattern, and it is now going to fit me way better.
Okay, so that's basically everything that I have to share today. In this video, if there was anything that you have more questions about or you're interested in knowing more information about, please do leave me a comment down below and just let me know. I have no problem coming in and helping you out. It might be someone else that it helps as well. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. I will talk to you all in the next one. Bye-bye.